Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Power Drift Quickies and welcome to hopefully the last car launch of 2024. This year has been absolutely crazy, and the last car launch is something that's named after me. Well, not really. This is Syros, that's how they pronounce it. I'm Cyrus. Welcome to Power Drift. This is essentially an SUV that sort of slots in where the Cadence is. Okay, the Cadence is a seven-seater. This is a five-seater. Interestingly, we've been talking about a five-seater SUV that actually has a lot more space in the back, but similar size for a while now. Finally, Kia has picked up on it. This essentially slots in between the Sonet and the Seltos, and that's interesting because there is a reason for it, a reason which I will tell you a little later in the video. Stay tuned for it. That is important, trust me, so stay tuned. Okay, let's go to the design language. Very butch, very bulky, very typically SUV like, if that's what you want to call it, which means it has lots of squares, it has lots of girth, if you can see here, like a nice thick bonnet. And the Kia design language, which we've seen on the likes of the Carnival and the EV9, which essentially is stacked vertically headlamps, now comes into the mass market. So you get that. And now the next generation Kia Seltos will also be this sort of design language. Now, there is a big problem. This problem I realized when all of you commented in the comment section when we put up some social media posts, right? The corners of a car, these, is where you get your first scratches. In this case, the corner of the car is the headlamp. Now, people in Delhi, I'm looking at you. Please be more careful of your headlights, which means you probably need to PPF your headlights. Now, it's not the exact corner. This is a little more sort of out by about say half an inch or 1 inch. But again, this is still on the absolute edge of your car. So be careful of this. It's not going to be cheap to replace if it does get broken or scratched. Also, that's a bit of a negative considering the fact that, people are a little sometimes careless with their cars. 17-inch wheels, wheel design, I will let you judge. Personally, I am not a fan of these sort of three-spoke wheels in general. I think they could have done better. But what this does sort of lend is the general bulkiness of the car, which sort of adds again, because as I mentioned, SUV-like design language, so these unpainted fenders helps. Now, look at this. What does this remind you of? Yep, Skoda Yeti, exact same design language as the Yeti. And you also get nice integrated door handles like the XUV 700 or the Tata Curve, etc. And again, a very interesting design language here. So instead of making it sort of flat, and they could have done it, they could have extended this line right here. They have given it a bit of a nice kink on top. Now this helps to sort of accentuate this back end. And again, it's almost like a rally car from the 80s. It's got these big box flares on it, if you can see. Now, the flare sort of starts here and ends up all the way at the back. Box flares are cool, okay? Irrespective of how you look at it. Box flares, look at this, same thing here. It sort of flares out. You can actually have a little, if you feel the car, you can actually feel a ridge here, right here. You can see it in the light. This is a box flare. So box flares are cool. In terms of overall design language, it is a bit of a love it or hate it design language. People might like it, people might not. We will have to wait for that. But if we sort of go around the corner here, the rear end is a little more conventional. Okay, so you got sort of top set tail lamps. Now these are not exactly tail lamps, there are two sets of tail lamps in this. So these are the sort of parking lights, if you want to call them that. And if you do open the boot, this section opens up, but this section still stays on. But you also have tail lamps on the bottom. So these are actually the brake lights right here, okay, and the fog lamps and the reverse lamps and stuff like that. But again, the same issue, right on the corner. Now I'm sure people are going to damage these up, so please, again, as I mentioned, thick PPF on these tail lamps straight up. But otherwise, it's an interesting car. Look, you can't blame Kia for being bold with their design language, right? A lot of people do boring stuff. We've had a whole sort of host of cars in the recent past which are very similar to what each other looks. This looks different. It might not look huge and large, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be in the compact, sort of between Sonet and Seltos segments. And I think this looks rather interesting. Now, whether people like it or not, that's still something that remains to be seen. Prices will be announced somewhere in January, and deliveries will start in February. Okay? But now the most interesting thing, we go inside. But listen, I told you that the reason for this car to exist, I'm going to tell you a little later. Stay tuned, because as I said, it is interesting, it is important. Okay, we finally made our way into the Kia Ceros, and we're going to turn it on. Actually, we're just going to keep it in accessory mode because there's not a lot of fuel in this. Okay, so first and foremost, new design language in general is nothing like the Sonet or the Seltos, but it is a little bit more premium as compared to both of them, in my opinion. There's a nice little QR code on this side. I wonder what this does. We will actually scan this in a bit and actually show you later. A nice big pane of instrument sort of cluster combined with the infotainment screen, which is quite nice. And you do get multiple color options. So one of the pictures that we saw on one of the SUVs did have a little blue patch on this. So depending on the variant, it does vary from variant to variant. Otherwise, a couple of important features. You get cool seats in the front, you get cool seats in the back. Very, very crucial for this car, because the rear seat is something that Kia is paying a lot more attention to, and we will get to that soon. What I also like is the fact that you get this sort of carpeting right here. Now, if this is an aftermarket or sort of an official accessory, or this is OEM, I don't really know yet. But the fact that this is there on the display car means probably that it is some sort of dealer fitment option. But this is cool because a lot of people do this aftermarket. I've done this to all my cars. It just keeps the interior nice and clean. That as a factory fitted or a dealer fitment option is always nice because it fits correctly. It fits how it's supposed to. Apart from that, nice little bits and pieces on the sort of steering wheel as well. You've got the traction mode, which is the different the sun's sand modes, but you don't really use it because it's a front wheel drive car. You also have the drive modes right on the steering wheel: sport, comfort, sort of city, etc. And you've got paddle shifters. Now this is the dual clutch gearbox. I'm assuming this is the petrol engine. Yep, this is the 1 liter petrol and the dual clutch gearbox. But overall, again, generally in terms of the way bits and pieces are, in terms of what all the quality is like, it does actually feel a lot more premium as compared to what this sort of overall segment has ever seen. Now remember, this is still a sub 4 meter SUV. So for a sub 4 meter SUV, this is definitely the most premium offering we've ever had in India. It's also going to be most expensive when the prices are announced, but otherwise overall it's an excellent interior. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm going to tell you why this car exists. I'm going to tell you now so that you don't have to wait till later. The real reason why this exists today, this sort of sub 4 meter car but with more space on the inside exists, is because the next generation Seltos is going to go larger. The next gen Seltos is going to go more expensive. And this sort of fits in right in the middle of those two cars. It's not much larger than the Sonet, which means it can still have those tax cuts, those lower GST rates, but you also have a lot more space on the inside. So this actually is wider than the Sonet, is wider than the Seltos. It's got almost as much wheelbase, I think 50 mm lesser wheelbase than the Seltos does. But overall, it's going to be more affordable car than the Seltos, both in this generation and the next gen Seltos. But now let's move to the rear because that's where the actual point of this whole car is. Okay, cool. Now we're in the rear seat, and this is what the whole car is all about, right? The whole point of this car is the rear seat experience. First and foremost, cool seats at the back. Very, very crucial. Nothing in this segment gets cool seats at the rear. This is very, very important considering the fact that this is, again, as I mentioned, meant for the rear seats. Now, both these seats recline to a point where it is Innova level comfortable. Look at this. That's proper comfort. This reminds me of the MG, the Windsor. Now, again, as I mentioned, it reclines. Let me put this seat back as well. Look at this. That's the level of seat recline this thing has. Nothing in this segment has this level of seat recline. I'm sorry about my cough. I've been having a fever for the last couple of days, not been too well. But I thought, can't miss this guy. It's named after me, so I have to come here and do these quickies for you guys. So very sorry about the slight wheezing and the cough that I have. Again, as I mentioned, the quality of the materials and just the fit and finish of everything is excellent. It is, again, I mentioned this, I keep mentioning it, right? It's the most premium offering in the sub 4 meter segment that we have ever had. Also, you've got the biggest, most massive panoramic roof. I think they've taken the one from the Seltos and just put it in here, or maybe it's slightly larger. I'm guessing it's the same one, but in this car, it just looks huge because it extends all the way to the back. So, just in general, you've got tons of headspace, even if you're not sort of reclined back. Look at this, you've got tons of headspace, you've got tons of leg space, and frankly, for people who are going to be chauffeur driven, this is probably the best car that you'll be able to buy in that sub 4 meter small SUV segment, sort of sub 20 lakhs. Will this be a new benchmark in that segment? I think it might be. So anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to get you a lot more detail with this car soon, and of course, we're going to drive it in the near future. I think end of January is when we drive this car. So for now, we're going to leave you at a sort of quickies that we've done. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys in the comments. And again, I apologize for the wheezy nose and the cough in the middle of the video. I just haven't been keeping well for the last few days, but I had to come to this event because, again, as I mentioned, Kia Syros. Kia Cyrus. But no cases on them, huh? Nothing. See you guys. See you in the comments.